I want to tell you that I volunteered at the Harwick VA Medical Center because I believed in giving back. That would be a nicer story. The truth is I needed 40 community service hours for a scholarship application. The VA was 2 bus stops from my apartment, and the orientation packet said flexible scheduling. I was 19 years old. I had a history paper due Thursday, and on the morning I'm describing, a cold Tuesday in November, I was standing at the back of the medical center's main atrium stacking folding chairs next to a portable speaker, trying to calculate how many more Tuesdays I would need before I could check the box and move on. The atrium was full. A Navy Rear Admiral was retiring his flag in a ceremony, and the hospital had laid it on properly. A color guard at the entrance doors, folding chairs in rows covering most of the floor. The hospital's senior staff in the front row beside a general I didn't recognize, dress uniforms everywhere. The hospital had hung a banner across the high window, something about 30 years of service. I don't remember the exact wording, and somebody had lined the front of the stage with fresh flowers in white vases that nobody was looking at. The Admiral at the podium had the kind of voice that was used to carrying across water, a low, steady cadence that filled the high ceiling without effort. He was talking about service, about the weight of a uniform, about the people who never sought recognition and deserved it most. I'd been listening for about 3 minutes before my mind went back to the history paper. That's when I noticed the woman with the cart. She was in teal scrubs, not ceremonial, not dressed for any of this, pushing a standard hospital supply cart along the back wall, trying to get from one end of the atrium to the other without drawing attention. She moved the way you move when you're trying to be furniture. Head slightly down, pace measured, hands easy on the cart handle. She was young, mid-20s maybe, dark hair pulled back, a hospital ID lanyard and a stethoscope, a badge that caught the light when she turned. She looked like she'd been on her feet since before I woke up. The ceremony coordinator, a stiff woman in a gray blazer who had already corrected my chair stacking twice, spotted her and made a sharp cutting motion with her hand. "Go around," she mouthed, pointing toward the far service corridor. The woman in teal gave a small nod and adjusted her route, easing the cart along the wall. The coordinator watched until she was satisfied, then turned back toward the stage. 30 seconds later, a doctor in the second row turned and waved at the woman with the cart, an impatient, back-off gesture, like shooing a slow driver. The cart was apparently too close to the seated section. The woman changed course again without a word, no expression change, navigating the outer edge of the crowd the way water navigates rock. I watched this because I had nothing else to do. I'd stacked all the chairs I was supposed to stack. The coordinator had told me to stand by, her phrase, and standing by in a packed atrium when you're 19 and have a history paper due means you look at whatever isn't the speech. The Admiral reached the part of his remarks where he asked everyone to observe a moment of silence. The room went very still. 200 people, dress whites in hospital scrubs and civilian suits, dropped their eyes or fixed them forward. The color guard at the doors went rigid. The only sound was the low hum of the HVAC system in the ceiling, and distantly, the sound of the elevator bank on the far side of the building. I have thought a lot about that silence since, about how a room full of people trained in different versions of discipline, military ceremony, clinical detachment, institutional patience, can produce a collective quiet that has actual weight to it. You feel it in your chest. I felt it that morning for the first time, standing there with a folding chair under my arm, not entirely sure why I'd stopped moving. And in that silence, the Admiral looked up from his notes. He scanned the room the way a man scans a horizon, methodically, without urgency, left to right, not looking for anyone in particular. The way experienced people look at rooms, reading the whole of it rather than any one part. He got to the back wall. He stopped. The woman with the cart had looked up. I don't know why. Maybe the silence called her attention the way silence does when you've spent time in places where silence meant something, where it was the sound between an extraction and a disaster, the sound you listened through for a voice from the water. Maybe it was nothing. But her eyes were up and they landed on the Admiral's across 200 heads in the full length of that atrium. And for a moment, 2 seconds, maybe 3, neither of them moved. Then she pressed 2 fingers flat against the left side of her chest. Not a wave, not a salute. A small, contained gesture, 2 fingertips laid against her sternum, held there for a count of 1. The kind of signal that has a specific meaning to the people who know it and looks like nothing to everyone else. That was all. I almost missed it. I was standing 20 feet from her and I nearly missed it. The Admiral stepped back from the podium. He was mid-ceremony. The color guard was holding the flag. The general beside him turned with a questioning look. The Admiral said something to him, quiet enough that I couldn't hear it from the back wall, and the general's expression shifted, not confused, more like recalibrating. The Admiral reached back to the podium. He picked up the microphone. He said one word. Anchor. It wasn't loud. He didn't shout it. He said it the way you say a name you haven't said in a long time, carefully, making sure you get it right. But the microphone carried it to every corner of the room, and the word went through that atrium like a current. The woman with the cart stopped moving. In the front row, 6 sailors in dress whites turned their heads as one. They weren't looking at the Admiral. They were looking at the back wall. They looked the way men look when they hear something they were not sure they would ever hear again, a little stunned, a little like they might not be able to speak. One of them gripped the arm of the chair beside him. Another pressed a fist briefly to his mouth. Then the first one stood up. Then all 6 of them stood up. The coordinator in the gray blazer turned around. The doctor who had waved off the supply cart turned around. 200 people turned around. The Admiral set the microphone down, stepped away from the podium and walked off the stage. He didn't take the steps to the side. He stepped directly off the front platform and walked through the seated rows, and people pulled their knees in to let him pass, and the 6 sailors fell in behind him. And all 7 of them walked the full length of that atrium to the back wall, where a woman in teal scrubs stood with her hands on a supply cart. I was close enough to watch his face when he got to her. He was not a small man, and he had spent 40 years in a uniform that teaches you to hold everything back. And even so, what crossed his face in that moment was plain enough that even a 19-year-old college student with a history paper due Thursday could read it. It was relief. The specific kind of relief you feel when you are looking at someone you thought you might never be able to thank. He extended his hand. She shook it. Then he turned to the room and he spoke. Not from the podium, not with a microphone, just his voice, the one built for open water, and the atrium was so quiet by then that it reached every corner without effort. He said her name, her full name and her rate and her call sign. He said she had been a Navy rescue swimmer and a combat flight medic, 2 deployments, and that 3 years earlier a helicopter had gone down 40 miles off the coast at night in high sea state with 6 souls aboard. He said the weather had deteriorated faster than the forecast predicted, 30-knot winds, 10-foot swells, a cloud ceiling that dropped visibility to near zero in the span of 20 minutes, and that the crew had gone into the water fast. He said the water temperature had been 53 degrees. He said visibility had been 0, and the sea was running hard enough that the ship's searchlights were nearly useless. He said she had gone into that water alone and brought out all 6 men, one by one, each passed through the dark chop, until every one of them was in the rescue basket, and she was the last person out of the water. He said she had held the chest of one of those men closed with her bare hands for 22 minutes on the deck of the ship, because the ship's surgeon was already working on 2 others, and she was the only one left who knew how. He said the flight surgeon's report described her actions in clinical language: intervention decisive, outcome consistent with field stabilization under austere conditions, and that those words did not begin to cover what she had actually done, and that everyone on that ship knew it, and that every man she brought out of the water knew it, and that he had known it for 3 years and intended to say so the first time he found her in a room. He said all 6 of those men were standing behind him right now. I looked at the sailors in their dress whites, standing in a row behind the Admiral in the back of the atrium, and I believed him. You could see it in how they stood. Not the formal, practiced stillness of men following protocol, the stillness of men who have owed something for a long time and are finally in the room where they can say so. The Admiral reached into his jacket. He took out a Navy medal, not a ribbon, the full decoration, the one that comes in a case, and he held it up so the room could see it, and then he looked at her and he said, "You never came to the ceremony. We couldn't find you. I've been looking for you for 3 years." She said quietly, "I transferred." He said, "I know. Took us a while." And something in the way he said it, matter of fact, no reproach, told me that a while was doing a lot of work. That someone had looked and looked, and that this morning in this atrium in this hospital, the search had ended on a supply cart run she probably tried to complete before anyone noticed her. The whole atrium rose. Not the coordinated kind, not prompted. The rows just came up, one after another, the general and the hospital staff and the color guard and the people in the folding chairs and the doctors against the wall and all 200 people in that room on their feet. And the sound wasn't a cheer. It was quieter than that, more like a collective exhale. The kind of sound a room makes when something that should have happened a long time ago finally does. The coordinator in the gray blazer was standing against the wall near me with her clipboard at her side. She was watching the woman in teal scrubs receive the medal, and her face had that specific, still expression that people get when they have said something they wish they could take back, but the moment is too large to let that matter. She didn't say anything. She just stood there, very straight, and watched. I didn't say anything either. I was 19, I had been stacking chairs, and I had no frame for what I'd just seen. I knew it was something I would try to explain for the rest of my life and never quite get right. After a while, after the Admiral had given a brief, private word to each of the 6 sailors, and each of them had shaken her hand, and the ceremony had quietly reconvened to finish the flag retirement the way it was meant to, I slipped out to the service corridor. I sat down against the wall. I thought about the paper I had due Thursday. I thought about it for approximately 30 seconds before I stopped thinking about it. I've thought about that morning many times since. What I come back to isn't the Admiral's voice or the sailors standing or even the medal. It's the gesture. 2 fingers against the sternum in the silence across a crowded room. Something so small you could watch the entire room miss it and understand exactly why. She hadn't announced herself. She hadn't asked for the room's attention. She had only, in one unguarded moment, let herself be recognized by someone who knew what he was looking at. There's a kind of person who does the thing that needs doing and then moves on to the next thing. Doesn't carry a sign about it. Doesn't build a monument. Just stacks the work up quietly and keeps going, transfer to transfer, cart to cart, and the debt accumulates in other people's hearts until the day it finally finds them in a crowded room and crosses the floor. I check the box now, but not the one on the scholarship application.